guess I would like to begin with our own, just a brief little prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Please enter each of our hearts. Help us to hear what we need to hear, speak what we need to speak. Open our hearts, open our minds. Let your love pour in. Amen.
So we're going to start out just a little bit by just telling you who we are. We're the Kristin and Rob VanLaecken. We have 5 children. If you don't know who we are, we're the people that come in late every 11 o'clock Mass.
We sit about 3 rows back there.
And make a bunch of noise.
Yes.
Yeah, that's us.
We are both born and raised in Watertown. We were high school sweethearts. Started dating our junior year.
Kristin turned me down the first time I asked her out.
And
we aren't going to tell that story right now. If you want to, I'm sure she will help you.
And after high school, we went to USD. We were there for 3 years until Rob started dental school. So we got married after 3 years at USD. And then we moved on to Lincoln, Nebraska, where we spent 4 years. And then
had Maya and Sophia.
Yep, Maya and Sophia were born, our oldest 2, in Lincoln. And moved to West Virginia, where we were for 3 years for orthodontic residency. And Ella was born, so she is a mountaineer. So if you ever ask her what her song is, she will say, "Taking Home Country Roads," and she will sing it all for you.
Go China.
And then moved back here in 2011 and had Sam and Luke, and now here we sit. I guess it probably started with how we ended up here, because I think it's kind of an amazing story of, it just always makes me think of John Holtz's quote of, "With God there is no coincidences." So we had agreed to speak at Truth on Tap, and then one day, it was a Wednesday morning, and after our women's group met, Missy asked me to stay afterwards for a little bit, and then she said, "Well, we still have one spot to fill for Faith in Real Life next year, and I was just wondering if you would maybe consider doing that instead of Truth on Tap." And she said, "We have a nun from Minnesota that has started her own convent," and Missy, correct me if I'm wrong on some of this, and I've been meaning to ask you what her name is, and I keep forgetting to ask you. Can you forget something? No, I forget everything. Like, if there is something to forget, I will forget it. So that's who they had reached out to, and she said, "We've been waiting for a couple months to hear back from her. I'm kind of feeling like she just maybe won't ever get back to us, so I'm trying to think of a backup plan just in case." So I said, "Well, I tell you what, I will just leave this in God's hands. If she can come, then great. I will take that as a sign that we are just supposed to do Truth on Tap, and we'll just leave it at that." I said, "But if she can't, then I will take that as my sign from God that this is where we are supposed to be." So that was at about 10:30. A couple hours later, 1:30 on the same Wednesday afternoon, she calls me back and she starts laughing and she says, "Kristin, you will never believe who just called me." And I was like, it was Sister, I don't know her name. So, thank you. So she called back that afternoon and said that she could not come. After months of waiting, she made the phone call that day. So I laughed and very nervously said, "Okay, I guess that's what we're supposed to do." So.
And then she told me, and I was like, "Sure." All right.
Okay, so to begin the whole thing, I think we do need to go into the definition of what grace is. So it's on the back of your sheet. I looked it up in the catechism because it just seemed like the best place to go. So grace is favor, the free and undeserved help that God gives us to respond to his call to become children of God, adoptive sons, partakers of the divine nature, and of eternal life. And again, like no coincidences. In the last 2 months, we've had several discussions about what grace is. And there was one night when we were talking about it that somebody had asked a question of, can you store up graces? You know, like what if I commit this really bad sin and all of the graces that I've been storing up for so long just go away? And I thought, that doesn't seem right. So as this conversation was going on, I was just having this like vision in my head. And so when I was closing my eyes just thinking of it, I had this vision of just like this really radiant light. Just incredibly, like almost like sunlight, but not quite, because you could stare at it, but it didn't hurt your eyes. Like it was warm and it was inviting and it was like, just, it made you just feel so peaceful. And then I pictured like a soul, you know, it doesn't, just for me it looked like, kind of like something dark, right? So around the soul is this incredible light always, at all times. It's always there, it never changes. What changes is the soul and how it can open and how it can close. And depending on the state of your soul, that is how much grace you are able to receive. So when your soul is completely open, and I think of Mary when Gabriel met her and said, "Hail, full of grace," right? Like we know that Mary to be different than anybody else because she was saved from sin. Her heart, her soul was always 100% open to receive all that God wanted to give her. But we as humans sin, right? And every time we do, that opening of our soul closes just a little bit. And every time it closes, you let less and less light into your soul. And then you get to go to confession, and then whoo, it opens all the way again. And then all of that light, all of that grace, all of that love pours down on your soul again and is there for you all the time. And so it's an incredible gift. And that's what I think of when I think of grace. And I heard another example that also strike very true to me. That if you think of grace as rain, right? It is pouring rain, and you want to go outside, and maybe you go outside with a small little like cup. I don't know, think of like a shot glass is the only thing I'm thinking of right now. Is that terrible? So you go outside with that, and you're probably not going to catch very much water, right? Okay, let's say maybe you go outside with like, a drinking glass. Probably going to catch more water. If you go outside and it's pouring rain with a gigantic bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket, you're going to catch so much water. So God's grace is all of the rain, and the size of your opening, like how big is your soul, that's how much rain you're going to catch. If you're just going to have a tiny little guy that you try to catch things in, you're not going to catch very much of it. But if you go out with a gigantic bucket, you are going to catch so much of it. That probably took way longer than I should have. But
Nope, that was great.
okay, so.
Thanks.
Yes.
She used the word, though, confession. We're going to talk about that a little bit. So it's like, ooh. Nobody exits the door. So I think, again, the point of us being here.
I'm sorry. Not doing that.
The point of us being here is to share with everybody how God's grace has impacted our lives in so many ways through what seemingly was one of the most difficult times we've ever been through, right? Just kind of a bomb dropped in the middle of our life. And what we're going to get into is in how some ways now we're actually grateful and thankful that some of those things happened. I wouldn't, recommend people going to sign up for what we did, but everybody has difficulties in their lives, and I think so often we try to run from those things. And in reality, I think God can teach us so much more in the bad times of our life if we let Him. If we can get past the anger and the hurt, God's grace is there, and it can change you in many ways. So we're not going to be able to share all the physical stuff. We'll go through the story for sure. But really what we want to do is talk about how we've attempted to, learn to follow God's will in our lives God given His grace to us. So.
All right, so we'll start from like the beginning, and I'll try to be as clear and chronological as possible. Sometimes I tend to jump around, so hopefully I won't confuse any of you. So the weekend before I was diagnosed, we went to Charleston for, Rob had some work meetings. So we were there, and when I woke up on Friday morning, I was putting on my moisturizer, and when you always put it on your neck down here, and I noticed that I had 2 very big lumps down here, and I thought, well, that's a little bit odd. Didn't really think too much of it, went on with our day. Next day, was getting ready, and I was putting lotion on, and Rob was like, wow, you have bruises all over your legs. He's like, what did you do today? Well, he was at meetings, and I was like, I don't know, I didn't do anything.
If you only knew.
So I was like, I don't really know why all those are there. I don't have a memory of, but they were pretty significantly. And just kind of dismissed that, and then we were coming home Sunday. As we were sitting in the plane, he looked over at me and he said, wow, like those bumps on your neck are really big.
They're like golf balls and everything.
You should probably go in and get those checked out. And I said, yeah, I think you're probably right, which is not like me because I am pretty stubborn and I don't like to go to the doctor if I don't need to. So normally, the 6 months before, I ran a fever of 104 for like 3 weeks and didn't go see the doctor because I'll be fine, it'll be fine. Well, this time I was like, yeah, I think I probably should. So got the kids off to school Monday morning, called Brown Clinic and to see if I could get an appointment with Dr. John, and if Dr. John is anybody's primary care, you know how hard it is to get into him when you need to. And the scheduler said, well, today's his first day back from vacation, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, so that's not who I'm going to be able to see today. But she said, oh, he's got an appointment at 9:45, and I said, sweet, I will take it. So that was like first sign of God being right there in the midst of that. So got the boys dressed and ready, and me and Sam and Luke headed to the doctor's office, and as we were sitting there, just asking for symptoms, and one of the things he said was, well, are you tired? And I just kind of looked at it crossways. I was like, he goes, okay, just, you're always tired. I'm like, yes, tired is just part of my norm, so that's not a very fair indicator of anything. But he said, I'm just going to run some tests to check for mono, which is what he told me. But he said in the back of his head, knowing that I had all the bruises, the big lumps, he just had to rule all of that out. So had some blood drawn. They sent me home because the lab was crazy, and he said he would just call with the results. So at 12:23 that Monday, January 30th, he called, and when I saw that it was Brown Clinic on my phone, and then I answered, and then it was him on the other end of the line, my stomach just dropped because I went, oh, this can't be good. If it is okay, then it's the nurse that calls that says, oh, you have strep throat. Pick up your prescription at Walgreens and be on your merry way. Well, and then the first words he said was, well, is Rob around today? And I said, nope, he's in Aberdeen today. And so we had to figure out a 3-way call, and so we were all 3 on the phone, and I don't remember, he said something about your white count was...
Her white count was 80,000 cubic millimeter, cells per cubic millimeter. It's supposed to be like 4, or I think it's like 11 to something like that. So
4 to 5,000 is normal.
And so there's a range there. She was like 8-9 times the limit of what she should, and first thing I was asked, is there any mistake in this? I can take, no. So
he said it is most likely a blood cancer of some type. I have an appointment for you with Dr. McHale in Sioux Falls on Friday. And we were like, that just seems really
It was a Monday.
late. This was a Monday. So he said, well, I have a few more calls I can make. Meet me at my office at 5. Anyway. So we met him at his office at 5. Before we went there, we came here to the chapel and we just sat. And I remember sitting in the entryway out there, and I had to call my mom. And that was probably like the hardest phone call I ever had to make. Because how do you call your mom on the phone? say, I think I have cancer. Sorry, that's just anyway. And then we had to go back home. We met with Dr. John, and then we came back home. And he said he was going to make a few more calls to see if he could get us in with somebody sooner. So talked to the kids at home. The youngest ones, we didn't really, talk too much, but our oldest, she kind of knew. You could tell she knew that something was wrong.
Father Paul was there, and our family was all there too. He was nice enough to come spend the afternoon with us, and so.
Yeah.
Our poor Maya, though, she had dance that night. We wanted to try. We didn't really know, so we wanted to keep everything as normal as we could, and kind of, even though it was just chaos. So we feel really bad about this now, but we basically talked to her beforehand, and it was time for us to kind of. So she went to dance and had to go do this, and so we didn't know it was this big a deal, but she always reminds us of that. So make sure you tell that part of the story.
Because on our way home from dance, Dr. McCall, who ended up being my doctor, Dr. Kelly, called Rob himself on Rob's cell phone.
It's about 7 o'clock. Yeah. And he said, he said, I'm on call tonight. If you want to come down here, I'll meet you as soon as you get here. With numbers like this, I would recommend coming down right away. And so it happens, again, I'm sure there's many great doctors. Dr. McHale's a great doctor. I'm sure they're all very, very good. But Dr. McCall happened to be the head of the transplant program at Avera McKenna. And there are probably 20 doctors that could have been on call. He happened to be the guy on call. He's the guy. He leads it all. He's been there for 25 years. He's been all over the world. And he met us that night, and we raced out, obviously, drove down with tears in our eyes. I don't know if we said anything the whole way. We're just kind of like, okay. But we raced down there, and he met us right away, and so now we're in the hospital.
Yeah, and by the next morning, they just pushed fluids the whole night. By the next morning, my white counts were down to 40,000, so they cut him in half. Did a bone marrow biopsy Tuesday afternoon. They told us that it was acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He said, we had to do some further genetic testing, but that won't come back for a couple days. So, but we have a treatment protocol. We know what we're going to do. So Wednesday, I started chemo. And then Friday, the genetic testing came back, and that was a hard day too. He said that I had the Philadelphia chromosome, which is I'll let you do that one because it's very scientific.
Yeah, so whenever most cancers in the body are the body not recognizing the cells are bad, and so the Philadelphia chromosome, basically the chromosome 9/11 flip-flop, and it's a really hard one for the body to recognize and get rid of. And so she actually had most cells have 46 chromosome pairs. She had 54. So there's 54 breaks in these cells that were the cancer cells. The most serious of them being the Philadelphia switches between 9 and 11. So that was probably one of the hardest days, besides from the initial diagnosis, because I Googled, don't ever Google. But I knew, I didn't say anything, nobody else knew. I didn't obviously share it with anybody, but I knew that the Philadelphia chromosome was kind of the kind of flip-flop whole thing, because with it, I think, if she doesn't have it, it's the beta cell leukemia, it's like 60 to 70% chance of life. With the Philadelphia chromosome, without a bone marrow transplant, she had a 5 to 10% chance of life. And so I was like, right? And with the bone marrow transplant, 35 to 40% chance of life. Still not great, right? And she has to go through a bone marrow transplant. I'm going to back up here just a little bit. So we kind of are on that first week of chemo in the hospital, but I remember that first day, I just kind of want to share my side of the story. I was in Aberdeen, got a phone call, and left right away. I actually remember putting brackets on. Somebody had brackets on their mouth with everything open, so I had finished what I was doing. I feel bad for that person. But I was like, I'm leaving, so they took care of the afternoon and drove home, angry, crying, confused, scared. And I remember telling God, I remember like, again, back then I was making deals all the time with God, you know, like, oh, if you do this, I'll do this, right? It's kind of how I approach God a little bit, and I'll get into that a little bit, but I said, you know, if this is Kristin's chance to go to heaven, like if this is it, then that's fine. Like that's my duty as a husband, to get her to heaven, my kids to heaven, but the rest of us are in big trouble. My mother is back there, violently shaking her head. And I remember just yelling, like, in the car, like, and I don't know how fast I was going, probably a little faster than I should have.
He made it home in record time.
Yeah, so I got home, and Father Paul was there, and their family, and my sister-in-law Jen was there, and my mom and dad came, and Kristin's parents, everybody was there, and so, but I remember on the way home having a conversation with God saying, you know, what are you doing? Like, I feel like we do everything right. Like, what do you want from us? Like, we have 5 kids. We are open to a big family. We do national family planning, go to church, we do this. Kids go to Catholic school. I'm starting listing off all my attributes, right? Like, oh, you know, like, I'm impressing you. Yeah, I know. But I was serious, you know, I was. And I remember saying, like, I'm never going to be happy again. Like, none of us are going to be happy again. Everybody needs mom. Everybody needs mom. Like, this is the one thing in my whole entire life that is just no way, right? Like, kids and all that stuff, again, love them to death, but Mama Bear is our rock, right? I remember saying, I'm never going to be happy again. Nobody's ever going to be happy again. Like, what are you doing? I remember like a little voice in my head saying, well, where do you find your happiness from? To which I replied, I'm asking the questions here. But I kind of ignored it. I kind of brushed it aside. But throughout the whole thing, that kind of kept on coming up, I guess. And so, again, we went through our story. You know, that Friday where we found out the Philadelphia chromosome was devastating. Because you feel like you have one bad thing, and the floor is there. And then the floor drops out again. And then it drops out again. Right? And you're like, I'm already on my knees, not where do you want me to go, right? Like, and it just continuous, right? Kind of punches in the gut.
And that same Friday, so I was on my protocol for how they were going to treat that particular cancer, which all of the chemo things, and I remember the first day of chemo, I mean, it was like a half-hour infusion. It was this tiny little clear bag, and I finished with it, and I was like, that was hard. Like, I can do this, I got this. And, Thursdays was okay, it was fine. And then Friday, they came in with this bag. And I don't know all the other types of cancers and all of the other chemo things, so I don't, for all of you that are suffering, I don't know all of those, but this bag was different. It was about this big, and it was brown. And then they told us, when you are getting this infusion, you cannot go where there is sunlight. I'm like, that can't be good. And this one was a 6-hour infusion. This particular drug was called methotrexate. And so any of you that have rheumatoid arthritis that take this drug, I think, oh gosh, it's just like, I hear the name and I shudder a little bit. But this one just knocked me on my feet, like knocked out. And for someone like myself, before all of this, I prided myself on being very independent, I got this, I can do this, I will handle all of the things, I will do it all. And then this was the first really big check of I can't. So family came down on Saturday, kids came down, and I don't remember any of it. The one thing I do remember is that Sam was like 3 at the time, and he has his special blanket, and I fell asleep on the chair on the couch, and somebody used Sam's blanket to cover me up, and he was so mad. It was like, I want my blanket back. And they were like, no, Mom is sleeping with it. And it was like, I don't remember that. I remember them telling me about this, but.
That weekend was, again, on my end, just watching her suffer so much after methotrexate. I mean, we were gung-ho, we're going to go do this, we can do this, and we're going to control, and this and that, and this and that, and we can work it out, and we're going to figure it out, and, we're going to find the answer, and, again, just kind of knock you off your feet a little bit. All the families around us, I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. All my kids are there. I remember going on an individual walk with each of them and talking to them about it, and them asking me, if Mom's going to be okay. And I said, yeah, of course, but, again, I just got off Google, so, yeah, that was a really hard weekend. And then Sunday, I'll let Kristin finish.
And then Sunday was Super Bowl Sunday, and, when you are, obviously that methotrexate really wiped my white cell count down, which is what they wanted. They have to get rid of all of your immune system. And so I have to shower every day because the risk of infection when you have no immune system is super great. So you have to shower, you have to wipe down with these special wipes, and it has to be done every day. So when you don't feel good, the last thing you want to do is take a shower. But I had to do that. So getting out, and I'm drying off my legs, and I must have come back up too fast or something because I passed out. And luckily Rob was there to catch me. But the next thing I remember, I woke up in bed and there was nurses all around me. And honestly, the thing that I distinctly remember was that I was so mad because they woke me up. I'd been so tired, but not be able to sleep. My body was so physically exhausted, but I couldn't manage to fall asleep. And now I was finally sleeping, and they woke me up. I was so mad. But
so I remember her going down and then coming up, and then and I kind of caught her in my arms. I was in there helping her dry off and stuff, and making sure she's okay, because Margaret, right?
Margaret was
we named her IV pole Margaret. Margaret spent a lot of time with us, the IV pole. And so it's kind of hard moving around that with all the cords and stuff everywhere in the IVs. So she passed out for about 15-20 seconds. I just kind of grabbed her, laid her on the bed, and Kristin's sister was there, and I had her go get a nurse, and then all of a sudden everybody was in there. And so they came in and said, well, this could be normal, it could be a brain bleed, so we're going to go down to the CAT scan lab. We're going to make sure she doesn't have a negative reaction in her brain to the high-dose chemo. And I was like, okay. So off we went, and
it all came back clear.
Everything was negative, yeah. But I remember sitting down there talking to Kristin's sister, and Tom Brady was winning another Super Bowl to make it worse. But then we came back up and everything was fine.
Other than I was just so wiped out. Couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom, so I had to use bedpan, and that is so humiliating. It's awful. At least when you have to do it after having a baby, you have this joyous little baby to hold, and so you don't really think about the fact that you can't go to the bathroom. But when you're just in a bed and so weak that I couldn't talk, and that was the only point in my whole journey that I ever thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is when I will go to heaven. And then I was laying in my hospital bed, and I looked up at the ceiling, and Maya had, I'm sorry, I used your name, I promised you I didn't use your name. And Maya had colored me a picture from a scripture coloring book that said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I just instantly was just washed in peace, because I realized that I didn't have to do anything. I had to just lay there and let Jesus do all of the hard work for me. That was it. I had to surrender, and I had to trust that the words that he spoke to me over and over again that week of, don't worry, Kristin, I got this. That's what I heard that whole first week. Kristin, I got this. It's okay.
So again, that night, into the Super Bowl and stuff, I still remember just being still really, really mad. I was in my rebellion phase of just not having anything of it. Like, I'm really big into control. I like to have things laid out and predictable. And I was still seeking for the answer. Okay, we're going to find the answer. We're going to make this better. That night it started to really sink in that maybe you don't have control, right? Maybe this you can't do anything. There's nothing that I can do physically to make this go any smoother or better besides pray and just kind of sit and let it hurt. That was it. And that was a very humbling thing, which I needed looking back on it. But I was still, still thinking, how am I supposed to do this? Like, we're only a week in, and my kids are here yesterday, and I'm trying to be happy for everybody, trying to keep it all together. God bless my brother who took over, the work part of it, so we don't have to worry about any of that, and covered for me. I owe him massively. But I was still under this is the end of not just, again, I was like, this is it. We're never going to be the same again. We're never going to be the same family again. We're never going to be happy. And again, that little voice, again, where are you finding your happiness from? It just kept on coming back at me, and I was not in any place to even think about that at that point. But looking back, that was probably one of the lower weekends, the lowest point the whole entire time, where it just kept on falling and falling and falling. And whenever I thought I was going to get caught, something else would happen, and something else would happen. God bless Dr. Kelly, though. He'd spend hours of time with us, hours. He'd come in and explain things and sit there for an hour. I hope he spent that long with us. The rest of his patients and his poor wife at home. I don't know if he ever went home. But just truly amazing man, and so we're very lucky that he was there. So that's kind of the story, that's kind of where we're at as far as, as things went through. We progressed from there, and we'll kind of touch back into, we went through about 3 weeks in the hospital there, got her white blood cell count down to 0, then they brought her back with growth hormone to try to get the normal cells to regrow, right? They knew the cancer was going to come back. She was going to have a bone marrow transplant, which they were going to schedule for April. It is now mid-February.
So the first thing they had to do was find a match. So then it began the search for, our prayer for that whole couple of weeks was right match at the right time, right match at the right time. So you can, for any of you males that are 18 to 30, you should get registered if you haven't. Go to bethematch.com.
And girls too, but girls
too, I should.
It's a little harder. It's a little harder to match with RH factor, positive, negatives with girls. That's a big one, and
so we were very fortunate that they didn't have too much trouble finding a match for me. I had 3 10 out of 10 matches, so then they had to just bring them in for further testing to find out which one would be the best, and then we set on April for a transplant date. So after that first couple weeks in the hospital, my white count got high enough that I got to go home, and it was most of Lent. Ash Wednesday was my first Wednesday home, and I went back into the hospital the week before Holy Week. So I was home for most of Lent of that year.
Be the Match has been, once the dust is all fully cleared, I think Be the Match is such a great program. Most donors come from Germany because it is a national law in Germany that you have to enter the match registry when you're 18 and you get your license. It is not hard to donate. They don't scoop in your hip anymore. They basically give you shots over a week. And then they put an IV in one arm and the other, and it takes out all the stem cells and then puts your blood back in. And so you have some, long kind of bone pain, I think, for a couple weeks or so. But without that 20-year-old male that we have no idea who it is, had no idea who we were, didn't know we had 5 kids. I know what I was doing when I was 20. It wasn't donating blood. We did it that later too. But without him, he saved not just one life, he saved 7 lives, right? And so how powerful is that? 20 years old, just probably in school. I think there was a spring break in there and he didn't really answer, so we're like, well, he might be on spring break. He is 20. I'm like, as long as he calls back. Hope he had fun. But what a powerful gift. And so if you want to know more about Be the Match, you can talk to us afterwards for sure. It's pretty simple. It's an easy thing to do. Yeah.
So, a lot of times throughout these last 2 years, people would ask, how are you still smiling? How are you still positive? How are you not just so angry and so, I don't know. And so, in thinking about that question in preparation for this, there's really not a simple answer, but it really all kind of started as a small little seed, mostly when Father Paul came, because through you, Father Paul, I have grown to see the beauty in the gift of the Eucharist. And it was something that I was born and raised Catholic, went to church always, prayed, did all of the things that we're supposed to do, but my heart wasn't there, it was like, oh yeah, I should stop talking. I just have discovered how beautiful and what a beautiful gift the Eucharist is that I never really saw before. And so slowly but surely things just started to change. That I didn't go to Mass on Sunday anymore because I had to. It was like, I have to go to Mass again. And then it was maybe there's some time this week that I could go to daily Mass. Like, that would be really exciting. And that, it just kind of, and then slowly but surely, then it was like, well, why do we say some of those things at Mass? And why do we believe the things that we believe? And so I started to buy books, and I really love books. I like to buy them, and I don't have enough time to read them, so they just kind of collect on my shelf at home. And then Rob goes, how many books do you read? I'm like, I don't know.
A lot.
So that's kind of like where it started to grow for me. And then the 2015, at the end of the year for Advent, we decided that we were going to do, I'll see my stack of books right in here. We decided to do the 33 Days to Morning Glory, which is a do-it-yourself retreat in preparation for Marian consecration. So, in a quick summary, it is that you go through 33 days of learning more about Mary and what a gift she is to each one of us and how you can consecrate your life to Mary. And at the end of it, essentially, you surrender all you have, all your works, all your prayers, all of your everything to Mary. And for some, that might sound terrifying, but for me, it was so free. Because I didn't have to worry about any of it anymore. Because I would always worry, like, what if if my prayer intention was for this person and it was supposed to go to this person instead and I did it all wrong? It's like, it's okay. All you do is you say, you know what, Mary? I'm just going to say these 5 Hail Marys and you take all of those graces and distribute them wherever it is that they need to be. I don't have to worry about that because I don't know it all, and I can't see it all, and you can, and you know exactly where all of those are supposed to be. So Rob and I did that together during Advent, and then our consecration day was January 1st on Mary, the Feast of Mary, the Mother of God. And, and from there it was like, then I just grew to love praying the rosary at any time that you just needed to and sometimes just hold it in your hand to just have that feeling and sense of just calmness. And you don't have to worry about all of it because somebody loves you so much that, it should just take care of it all. I don't know.
Do you want to talk about the wine?
Oh, yes. Okay. So then, that's a good one. So that was January 1st, 2016. Fast forward to December of 2016. And
right before she got sick.
Chris Starver was here for Faith in Real Life that December. And she came to our women's group in the morning, and then we went out for lunch at Perkins. And as she was sitting there, I noticed a book that she had that was this one. And I was like, that cover looks familiar. That kind of looks like this one, so I wonder what it is. So, I never looked at papers, it's okay. So then I decided to ask her about it, and she says that it is a book on consecration to divine mercy, which I had heard a little bit about before, but didn't know too much about. But she said it's based on St. Therese, and I went, oh, really? Because thanks to Missy, she introduced me to my favorite saint, and that is St. Therese of Lisieux. And I just love her for her simplicity and for how much she just loves God and really, truly believed in how much God loves her, which is something that I have always struggled with, is believing that God could love me. And so I decided to buy the book because that's what I do. I find a book that I might want to read, and I'll just go to Amazon, and it'll be at my house in 2 days.
Awesome.
And so it's set up, it's from the same author as the 33 Days to Morning Glory. So I looked at the chart that tells you, because your consecration day, you try to set it to one of the feast days so for this one, it was one of St. Therese's feast days. So I decided on February 2nd, which means I had to start it on December 31st. And that meant that my consecration day to Divine Mercy was on February 2nd, which was my first Thursday in the hospital. So I made my consecration to Divine Mercy from my hospital bed at a Vera McKinnon.
Yep.
And the quote that I read from this that really, again, with God, there are no coincidences. So the fact that I chose to read this book right before this, and all of it prepared me so much for all of the things that I would go through. And in it, Therese says this: "Never have I felt before this how sweet and merciful the Lord really is. For he did not send me this trial until the moment I was capable of bearing it. A little earlier, I believe it would have plunged me into a state of discouragement." So I just know that all of the things that happened to me in those years leading up to this led me to that point where I could endure this battle with faith that was never shaken. I never doubted that God was there. I never believed that it wouldn't be okay. And the thing about that word okay is that it's a dangerous word to use when it comes to cancer, illnesses, and any of those things, because it's not okay. It's not okay for everybody. And not everybody gets to still be here. And just because those people that you love aren't here it doesn't mean that God doesn't love them. It just means that sometimes it's a different kind of okay. And my transplant coordinator, her name is Megan Timmer. I don't know if somebody out there might know her. When I was in the hospital, her husband was battling a brain tumor. that nobody has ever survived before. But they went into it saying, we're going to be the first ones. We're going to beat this. And they were always so positive about it. I mean,
It's amazing.
it was amazing. Her amount of faith was amazing. And then there was, when I was in the hospital the second time in April, after my transplant, they were in the hospital for lots of tests because he was having issues again. And she would always come see me when they were up there. So she was sitting in my room that day. Probably were there too.
Mm-hmm.
And, she said, we just, asked how things were going. And she said, it's going to be okay. She said, it's a new kind of okay. Because at that point, they kind of realized that it wasn't going to turn out the way that they wanted it to. But she said, it's a new kind of okay, but it's going to be okay. And he passed away about a month later.
Yeah.
And, and she'll just still say that, we miss him, but we get signs that he is in heaven. Little things here and there that let us know that he is okay.
So, bone marrow transplant happened on April 11th. We just celebrated her second birthday. We have cake it's her second birthday. And so
now I get to celebrate.
It's pretty anticlimactic. We had the people in the room. We all said prayers. And it literally it's just gravity fed, which is unlike any other IV she had. It's the simplest thing in the world. And again, God bless that 20-year-old, that male, save her life, all our lives. But it goes in, but you think like it's then you have to come back from that. And so, kind of fast forward, we kind of deal with things, that's the first 4 months. They said it's going to take 2 years. And I just remember finally getting hope a little bit, right? And then waiting on the blood test and then finding hope. And, we finally got to come home, but then it seemed like for that 6 months there, every third weekend we were driving down to Sioux Falls to go to the emergency room. And
post-transplant, if you run a fever over 105, you're supposed to go into the ER.
So I remember one of those times we were in Sioux Falls. I went to the cathedral to pray, and Marcus Seamus was there, and the cathedral was locked, but he got me in to pray with the Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, which was wonderful. They're all about this tall. I'm not lying, they are this tall. But I went in and prayed in front of the Blessed Sacrament and put my patrician. The next Sunday, we were still there. Spent a lot of time in Sioux Falls. If you want a good restaurant in Sioux Falls, I've eaten a lot of them. So lots of takeout. But I went to confession, and I don't know, I didn't really used to go to confession a lot. I kind of did here and there. But I remember the rector there, what's his name, right here? Father Fitzpatrick, yeah. I went off to the side and told him my story, told him my struggles, and he looked at me, this ties right into you, he said, you know what, no matter what happens, it's going to be okay. That's what he said. And I looked at it and I'm like, you don't know. But I think back about what that meant and how I feel now and how much God has showed me, revealed himself to me and how he loves me and takes care of me. It's going to be okay. It is. Before all this happened, before any of this, I thought I was a good Christian. I thought I knew what it meant to love God. You could ask me a Christian question, a church question, I'd probably be able to answer what I was supposed to do, and here's what I should say. I thought I had a relationship with God. But God meant to me that, he was a way to just do things to make me happy, right? And we're all so good at finding worldly things to fill in the gaps when things go bad. It's really easy when things are going great, right? But everybody has a low time, and it may not be cancer, it may be this or that. What do you do then? What I was doing is clinging back to the worldly things, right? Whatever they are, okay? And always going back to those things, always going back. And it would fill me up a little bit, and I would sink down again. What I started to realize, and most through this, I don't have any control anymore. And so, what am I going to do if I don't have control? That means God has to have control. So, where am I going to be happy from? And I started realizing, what do I find my happiness from? And it wasn't God. And so the relationship I thought was so great with God was pretty shallow, really shallow. God was a tool. And so, I don't know how many of us feel like that, but, again, going to confession, being forced to look yourself in the face and go through your examination of conscience forces you to do those things. You have to look at yourself. Father Mike Schmidt says the true definition of humility is knowing the absolute truth about yourself or something. The absolute truth, right? So, the only time that we're forced maybe to look at the absolute truth of ourselves isn't there, right? God does not need you to go to confession. That's not for him. It's a gift. He wants you to look at yourself and show you how many things you are attached to on the world that are preventing you from loving him and you feeling his love and his grace. That's what it's about. Again, the first couple times, I would go in, I'd have the same sins, and I'd be back, and those are the big ones, right? We all have those in our lives, whatever it is, yelling at your kids, prideful, things like that. And I go to Father Paul every time, and he still comes to dinner, right? So, quick off short. I have to tell this, sorry, Father Paul. So before this whole thing, we all went to confession as a family. And this describes, I thought I should be the one to get cancer, and it was Kristin. I was like, well, that was a different question. But Kristin's pennant, we got out and had our penance. And I go, what was your penance? She goes, I'm supposed to think of all the ways that my family loves me and that my family should be grateful for me. I'm like, that's awesome. She goes, what was yours? I'm like, I'm supposed to think of all the ways I need to be thankful for my family. Talk about a kick in the pants. So anyway, in going through this, now, again, I remember having a conversation. I apologize to everybody that's been behind me in the confession line, too. I really sincerely do. I get a little windy in there and ask questions. So I started Father Paul was nice enough sometimes to, just meet outside and hear confessions outside, which was good for everybody else, probably. But powerful things happen when you're forced to realize you don't have any control. When you have no control and you know the things of the world don't make you happy anymore, where do you go? I went to confession and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I was not aware of how much I needed Jesus Christ. I had no idea. I thought I did, but I had no idea. In my sins and kind of going through, I remember having a conversation with Father Paul once, and he said, maybe you're not supposed to stop this yet. Maybe God wants to see you can't do it by yourself. Still carrying pride, right? So instead of praying to stop the sin, like I'm in control, I'm going to get it over with, pray for the grace to be able to stop this, and then be patient. It may not happen when you want it. But then as all these things start to unravel, right? I describe myself as a big onion, right? So I undo all the outer crusty layers of the big sins, right? But on the inside, I still smell really bad, right? It's really true. There's so many little things that you don't even know that you're doing. You don't know the attachments that you have unless you're forced to stare them in the face. You have no idea. And those are the things that are closing off your soul, like we talked about earlier from the grace. Those are the things that give you a shot glass, which sounds good, but really want the bucket, right? So going back on just my whole journey through this, I'm starting to be unraveled. Kristin's going to the emergency room, and I'll tell more about through the whole thing. I saw rainbows, right? I don't know why, like rainbows, but when Kristin never got sick, there would be a rainbow in the sky. I was driving down one day to work, and she's in the hospital back. Our kids are, and God bless our community. They helped us in so many ways. We didn't cook a meal for a month, or probably like 6 months. They did our laundry for free. People came out of the woodwork to help us, and that is so unbelievable. It was truly God showing us the love He has for us to other people, and it was amazing. But anyway, I'm driving down, and there's no clouds in the sky, and there's a rainbow that just drops down. I'm like, okay, I can think of that. A week later, there's sprinklers that are on that have never ever been on ever because it's been raining this year all the time. And I drive by the sprinkler, and there's a rainbow in the sprinkler from the sun. And so my first reading, I was a lecturer. I had not lectured in 7 years. The first reading I had when I came up here, when I lectured, was Noah and God putting the bow in the sky. Like, I don't want to believe this is real. Like, I'm seeing rainbows. I don't want to tell anybody. But this just keeps going, right? It's like, what? There's one important one that I really want to share. I won't be so windy, sorry.
It's okay.
But I remember Kristin was sick. I remember, like, falling. I was driving, so I couldn't fall on my knees. But I'm yelling again. And we're like, this is when you start to have hope and then it gets crushed. And hope and gets crushed. He's humbling me. He's just completely humbling me. And I needed a lot of it, obviously. But I'm driving, I'm like, what do you want from me? We're back in the hospital again. Things are okay, better, but we're still in the same spot. I've given everything to you. I know where I need to go. Like, stop pushing me. I know where I need to go. He's laughing at me, probably. But I'm like, what do you want? What else more? Like, where am I supposed to go? I have no idea where to go. What do you want from me? And it was raining that day. And I went around the corner of the north thing, and it could not have been more perfect. I looked down the horizon of the road, and straight up from the road was a rainbow that went straight up, like directly on the road, straight up in the air. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. What? It was a keep going. And I just heard, like, just keep going, right? Keep humbling yourself. Keep going. So often I think we realize that, okay, I'm giving my life to Jesus. I'm going, right? Then what? Right? You still have to keep going. You're still going to have, just because you give your life to Jesus doesn't mean things are going to be easy. They probably get a little harder, right? Matter of fact, when you start understanding that people of this world and things of this world, all the things we've attached to, don't make you happy anymore, and you still don't have God quite yet where you want Him to be, that's lonely. It's the most lonely feeling in the world, because where do you go? Right? And that's where I was at. I was like, I don't know where to go. I love all these things. I was so attached to friends, and these are all good things. They're not bad things. They're blessings from God. You know, a great friend group. Family, Husker football. I don't know. That's painful enough. But the Vikings, all these things that are just part of my life, I'm filling the gaps and holes with. I'm resting on them for my happiness completely. And there's so many things there. So it's a lonely feeling when you get there. But again, get up, keep going again. I just kept on going back to confession. I just kept on going, because whenever I fall, I knew that's where I had to go back to. Original sin, if you think about this, and I'll let Kristin talk again, sorry. The first original sin is the devil convincing man that what they did really might not have been that wrong with God, right? Like, did he really say that? Did he really say that you shouldn't be there, right? That's the original sin, right? And so we hide from God so many things that we don't even know we're hiding. Just because, well, is it that bad? Is it this? Is it that? No, I'm okay. I can stop that by myself. But the humility part of going to confession, the humility of looking yourself in the eye and truly recognizing yourself, is a gift. It allows us to detach ourselves from the things we think make us happy and start grabbing onto God.
Yeah. The biggest lesson that I have taken from the last 2 years is that I struggle with not feeling lovable. Like, why would anyone love me? I forget everything. Like, everything. I forget it. I say I'm going to do this for you, and then I forget. Or I get busy, or I get distracted, and then I don't do it. My life is filled with, like, all of the things that I don't do, and I'm not a good housekeeper. Like, I just think, I'm terrible. Most of you know how good of a housekeeper is. I'm not good at it. But, so like, before I got sick, I prided myself on being able to do all the things, like running my kids all over town to do all of the things that they love to do. Cooking all the meals, having the hot meal for the kids all the time. I felt like I needed to do it all because that's what makes me lovable. And then I get sick, and then I can do none of it. I didn't cook a meal for like 6 months. God bless all of you people that cooked for my family. for 6 months and brought it to my house. I can't.
Thank you, Senator Knopf.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But then you're forced to confront this reality of, now I can do nothing. So now I am like extra unlovable because now I can't do any of the things that I thought made me lovable in the first place. So now what do I do? Because I just stuck. And then, so into my head pops the Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And so I just started looking, like, what does the Bible say about how Jesus loves me? And the verse that kept coming up was, I believe it is Isaiah 49:16. Anyway, I'm not a scripture, like I can remember the things, but not all of them, which chapter came from. It is the phrase, it is this line, I have inscribed you on the palm of my hand. So when I read that, I just imagine God's hands, right? And not the back of your hand, because whoever looks at the back of their hand, not that often, but the palms of your hands? How often do you look at the palms of your hands? And on God's hand is written my name, tattooed on his hand. He can't ever get rid of it, and he looks at it all the time. And that is true for every one of you, that God loves you so much that he has your name tattooed on the palm of his hand. And then today, as I was sitting preparing for this, I was reading the readings for today, and guess what the gospel is?
Perfect.
Right there. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And then my favorite thing to do with that one, I don't know where I learned this from, I didn't make this up myself, I promise. I steal everything from things that I've read or heard from somebody else. But instead of saying God so loved the world, you replace the world with your name. For God so loved Phyllis that he gave his only begotten Son. Because when you make it that personal, then it's easy enough to think, oh, he gave it for the world, yeah, sure. But when you make it personal, for God so loved Michelle that he gave his only begotten Son, it is so much more powerful. And that is true for everybody. And my favorite thing at baptism, as Father Paul, is how you say, you look at a baby, right? Babies are helpless. They can't do anything. But what do babies do? Everybody loves babies because they just are. They exist. And that is how much God loves everybody. And it's not because of what they do, but because of who they are. And that God didn't make any of you because he had to. He made each of you because he loves you and wants you to exist in the world for whatever reason that might be. And so have any more words.
That's enough.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
So it just is, that's it. That I don't have to do or be anything. And on those days, there were some days though that I would wake up and I would be so mad. And I would say, you know what, Jesus, I don't want you today. Because you make my life so hard. Make it so hard. I just want you to just go just for today. You can come back tomorrow. But today I don't want you. Mother Teresa said, just stop kissing me already. Because she always said that, when Jesus comes to kiss you, he gives you some of his sorrow too. And she's like, no, I don't want it. And there were some days that was true. But then you just are reminded, and the beauty of the church is this gift of redemptive suffering, that that when Jesus does love you, he trusts you enough that you get to share some of his cross. And everybody's crosses they look so different. And, in talking to people, that some people start sharing some of the things that the crosses that they carry. And people are quick to say, like, oh, but it's nothing like cancer. And don't do that to yourself, because everybody's cross is different for everybody. And what may seem like a big deal to some people isn't for others, and what might seem like a small deal to some is a really big deal to others. So everybody's cross is different. But Jesus loves you enough that he trusts you to carry some of his cross too. So it's not like a punishment that you have to suffer. He's not, but it's merciful. It is, he loves you enough to share that with you, and that he wants to travel that road from the road. I can't say, I should just stop talking because now I'm gonna not make sense. All I guess I'm trying to say is Jesus loves you, and he wants to share all of your life with you, all of the joys, all of the sufferings, all of everything that you have. He wants it all. So just let it go, surrender.
Let him have it.
Let him have it.
So, wrapping up here, I know we're kind of getting so long.
We're probably a little over.
It's all right.
Sorry.
We'll wrap it up here, but there's been a couple of books that have been really important to us on the way through that we listed back there, but one in particular through just a group of people in the parish were able to provide a copy for everybody. So on the way out, you'll get a copy of Interior Freedom by Jacques Philippe. Jacques Philippe has written many books that have really, I feel like God has spoken to me through those in ways to get me through this. Interior Freedom, he goes through when something happens to you that is difficult. It can be cancer, it can be anything. There's 3 stages, and I'll argue it kind of makes 4. The first one is rebellion, right? So something bad happens, we rebel. That's what I did, right? Then there's resignation, where we're okay with the idea, but still not very happy about it, and we're just like, either way, right? But it's fine. I accept it. I get it. If you let him in, some people stay in rebellion, some people stay in resignation. Some people never leave those stages, right? But where God really wants to touch you is he wants to move you into the third one, which is consent. Okay, God, I have no control. You have all the answers. Let me give my life to you, and you take over. But like Father Paul always says, do you believe that Jesus Christ loves you enough, or you can trust him enough to let him do that? In order to have Jesus Christ, you have to first admit that you need him. You have to. You can't have grace if you don't admit you need grace. You have to be humble. The first virtue is humility. That leads to all the other virtues. Humility is the first one. I really believe the best place to find humility is in suffering. And the best way to direct your suffering, whatever it is, we all have our things, it doesn't have to be cancer, it can be little things, is in the confessional. I really believe that without that sacrament, this would not have been a blessing. We would not have looked at this as a blessing in the end. So, rebellion, resignation, consent, okay, I give you permission to rule my life. And it's a daily choice. You can't just say, okay, here we go. It's a daily choice. And then the fourth one, which he talks about later, is thankfulness. That in a lot of ways you are thankful that this happened. And we feel that way. I think we both feel that way. That we're thankful that some of this happened. In another book, just real quick, this is what I think, again, we have those things, but I think another important part is, another book is called Searching for and Maintaining Peace. Great title, right? But he says, in the book, he's describing the conversation between a demon and a priest, and he's describing how they can overcome any sin, like they can strength of man or pride or all these things. They can make people feel these things. There's one thing they always have trouble with that they can't get past, and that's what they call goodwill, right? So goodwill is basically like, get back up, dust yourself off, return to God. Get back up, dust yourself off, return to God. I sin, and I sin, and I sin, and I sin. But as long as you have goodwill, as long as you return to Jesus Christ, say I'm sorry, then they have no hope. So keep going. Just because you accept Jesus Christ one day does not mean it's going to be easy. It's probably going to be harder. It's going to get lonely. There are things there that are very, very difficult. It makes it harder. Get back up. You might have the same sin over and over again. I've done it. He comes to dinner. Get back up, keep going. Get back up, keep going. Get back up, keep going. Fall. Don't be afraid to fail. I think that's probably, again. But again, there's a book on the way out. Hopefully you find as much inspiration in whatever you're in as we have.
Yeah. I think that's...
Yeah.
So just, he said, keep going, keep going, keep going. Trust. Surrender. Trust. Trust in God. Trust in His love for you, always.
Thank you again, Rob and Kristin, for sharing with us. Since I can't talk about what happened in confession, I do still go to their house or something. And it is, again, a great opportunity tonight. We will have adoration here in just a few minutes, and then we'll also have the confessionals open as well. Rob and Kristin will be available.